do you know how much this meeting is costing us? My time and all of your time around the table, and we're discussing something that's worth this amount of money in the business. It's like, does this really make any sense? So if you create an environment of great leadership, an environment of great management, you'll get accountability because you really can't make people accountable. And don't we need that in this world? A little bit more vulnerability, a little bit less righteousness, and I'm right, you're wrong, and more, boy, did I get that wrong. And let me tell you what I learned. And so that's what the podcast is all about. Welcome to the show, Beth. It's lovely to have you here. I'm so glad to be here on the other side of the world. I know, it's funny. I have a lot of my guests come from the US, and it's always a different time zone. So I'm in the future tomorrow morning while you are in the afternoon. But whereabouts are you in the US, Beth? I'm in the Chicago area. Ah, great. It's one place I've not been to, but I hear great things about it, yeah. It gets pretty cold there in wintertime, right? It does. It does. Not as much as it used to, but it's still pretty cold. Fair enough. Hey, look, now you're an expert EOS implementer. We've just been chatting before we came on the show, and you shared with me your kind of journey to get into EOS. Would you mind sharing that with the listeners for me? Sure, absolutely. So I've had a pretty crazy career path. I started in film. I worked on movies like Groundhog Day. I did TV series Twin Peaks. So I'm totally dating myself by saying this. And but I did that for about 10 years. I worked as a camera assistant, a focus puller, and it was a really great job. And then I took a break, had a family. I have 3 kids. They're all grown now. And when I was at home with my kids, I had a couple of businesses, a bookkeeping business, a web design business. And, I was just trying to figure out how to make money and also take care of my kids. And then one day my sister called me and said, "Hey, do you want to buy this bakery that I work at?" And I was like, "Sure, why not? How hard can it be?" And so we started that bakery together. And basically it was a turnkey business because it was an established business, but we grew it from 2 people to 32 people in 6 years time. So it was quite a growth explosion. And, I went to film school. I didn't have a degree in business. I didn't have an MBA. And we grew so fast and had to learn so much. And along the way, somebody handed me a copy of Traction, and I read it and I thought, oh my gosh, this is everything. This is everything that I've ever read in any business book. And it makes so much sense. And we absolutely have to do it. And I said that to my sister in 2012, and the book sat on the shelf for about 2 years. And then we decided to implement EOS in 2014 after we had added a cafe, and it was really crazy. And so, long story short, I became an implementer in 2018 after I had been teaching EOS concepts at conferences and things like that. And I was just so mad for EOS. I just loved it so much that I realized that this is really what I wanted to do. And with my sister's blessing, left the bakery. They were in great hands. EOS had worked. I had worked myself out of 4 seats, and we had a great general manager and integrator, Fran. And they're still doing well, still running on EOS. And so I became an implementer in 2018, and since then, I've just tried to keep deepening my mastery of EOS because although it's a simple system, you can go so deep with it. Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting that your story about leaving the Traction book on a shelf for 2 years. It's amazing how many clients I have that literally take a Traction book from me. I hear nothing from them for 2 or sometimes 3 years. And then all of a sudden they call and they say, right, I'm ready to go now. You're like, sorry, what? Well, I've read the Traction book and we're ready to do EOS. It's like, okay, I haven't heard from you in 2 or 3 years, but that's great. Let's get started. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't bad enough, right? Things hadn't gotten bad enough. Yeah, that's absolutely true. When the timing is right, it happens. So interesting because, you're very, very, very career, not your usual pathway into business ownership or even, and yeah, so multiple business ownership. What was it about the Traction book that you really struck you as being different? Because there's loads of books out there, right, that talk about business systems and business ways of doing business. Well, like most visionaries, I think I got to chapter 4 and I just slammed the book shut. And I think chapter 4 was the people chapter, right? And I could be wrong. I mean, maybe I should check myself. I mean, I should know this, but anyway, it was something that was like, this is the missing piece. This is it. And we had tried Great Game of Business, several other things, and Flavor of the Month. We were that business. And when I read it, the simplicity is really what landed for me, is that it wasn't this complicated thing that was gonna be really arduous. Um, Having said that, it is a simple system. That doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, there's so much depth in behind it, but I love the fact that it is simple, which means you can start to make fundamental changes in your business quite early on. But the more you go into it, the deeper you go. And I know that EOS has brought out a whole bunch of different books since the original Traction book that go deeper into the various components. So we've got the sort of 6 key components books coming out in various shapes and forms. But there
Mhm.
was also the How to Be a Great Boss, which is something that you've taken a huge interest in. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. I was plucked from obscurity, I like to say. I had the good fortune of having an office roommate in Renee Boer. Renee Boer wrote the book, How to Be a Great Boss. And during COVID, we were all trying to figure out how to do things online. And he called me and he said, Hey, I have these great boss workshops that I do, and I need to figure out how to do them online. Do you want to just be my equal partner in this? And I thought, like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I don't know anything. Like, I'm a baby in the world of EOS. And he was such a good friend and mentor during that whole period of time. And I just learned so much from him, not only about LMA and being a good leader and manager. I mean, that there was so much content that he had that was just so rich. But I think what Renee taught me more than anything was just how to be a good human. And that, I mean, he's recently retired, but he is one of the most decent people I've ever met. And to be lucky enough to have a business partner like that and a mentor, um, I mean, I just felt like the luckiest person in the whole world of EOS. And so we worked over the next 5 years to develop that content. We brought it to EOS worldwide. It's now something that is taught actually all around the world. And that program really helps bosses get to the next level of LMA. You know, we
And Beth, just before we go ahead, yeah, because some people may not know what LMA is, so why don't we explain yeah, because we have lots of 3-letter acronyms at EOS, so why don't you explain what LMA is for those who maybe don't know what it is?
So leadership plus management, accountability is simply a byproduct of great leadership and management. So if you create an environment of great leadership, an environment of great management, you'll get accountability because you really can't make people accountable. And this is a skill set that a lot of entrepreneurs just don't have. They don't, they're too busy building the plane as they're flying it and they're not going and getting professional development. And neither are their staff. And so they're fumbling around trying to figure it out. And then EOS comes along and we start introducing these tools and concepts to them. And then they have a path forward. And so they get a taste of that the leadership team does in the sessions that we do. But for everybody else in the organization and the leadership team, if they want to go deeper, the Great Boss Workshops help them do that.
That's great. And so I'm really keen to understand, some of these tools that you're talking about. How did you use them in the bakery business? Like, what was the most revolutionary tool, I suppose, that you used in transforming that business?
Well, I think the accountability chart was huge. And I mean, so imagine two sisters who are, both highly capable people and the overlap of our roles and who did what. And it was very frustrating for both of us because it felt like it was, we were sisters, but it felt like playing mom against dad in in the bakery all the time, and I was always the heavy, and she was the nice one, right? And so people would always go to Becky if to get the answer they wanted, and no one would ever come to me. But when we had the accountability chart, it became clear what the roles were, and it made it a lot easier. And so that and level 10 meetings, of course, which just biggest bang for the buck tool out there.
But I think a lot of people start with the level 10 meeting. Well, actually, most people start with the VTO because that's the easy part, but they start with level 10 meetings. But level 10 meetings really are become, very, very helpful when you've got that accountability chart, right? Because the accountability chart is like the backbone for everything EOS in terms of driving your scorecard, your rocks, your which meetings you attend, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and don't you find that that is the tool that gets the least attention throughout the journey?
I think, yeah, I work with a lot of self-implementers who've often self-implemented for a couple of years, and they come to me and they go, look, we've been doing EOS and it's sort of working, but we're not quite getting what we want. And the first thing we look at is their accountability chart, and often doesn't even exist. So they've completely skipped it, or they did it very much like an ordinary organizational chart, did it once, quick overview, shoved it away in a drawer somewhere and haven't referred to it. Whereas the teams that get the best success are those who actually really focus on that and make sure everything is kind of driven from that accountability chart. And review it regularly, of course, as the business changes.
I always refer to it with my clients as a living document. That, the scorecard, I mean, these are living, breathing documents that are, you need to be almost obsessive about looking at them.
I agree. I mean, I'm looking at your journey, 2 people to 32 people in 6 years. I've been working with a client just recently who went from 4 people to 46 people in 3.5 years. And, that team is still continuing to grow at great pace. And they're looking at their accountability chart every 90 days and just really asking the tough question about, is this still the right structure for where we're headed, what we're trying to do, which, of course, then starts to impact the scorecard and the rocks for their quarter as well. So, yes, you're right. It has to be something you obsess about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so that was a key thing. The level 10 meetings. I mean, that's another EOS term, and I think it'd be really good just to do a little bit of a deep dive into what a level 10 meeting really is, because that must be a fundamental part of the communication amongst your people.
Yes, absolutely. I remember when we brought level 10s to the bakery, it was something that at first it was just the leadership team, obviously, that was doing them. And then we informed the bakers and decorators, hey, this is coming, this level 10 meeting, and you really need to start having these. And they resisted and resisted, and, they weren't having them. And, so this is where rollout, it gets really hard because leaders are all excited about the vision. They want to get it going. And then everybody else in the organization is exhausted because they've had so many things foisted upon them over the years. And it was absolutely that for us. They thought, oh gosh, this is just like great game of business.
Here we go again.
Yeah. And what was funny, I mean, just to kind of jump to the end of the story, within 6 months of rolling out, and once everybody got the feel for those level 10 meetings, they would not pass that up for anything. The bakers and the decorators met together. It was kind of a larger level 10 meeting, but boy, that team never skipped a level 10. And I have to say, the sales team frequently made excuses, and, other teams, but that team didn't want to miss it for anything. And once they got a hold of that and saw how powerful it was, there was no going back. They were absolutely bought into the system.
See, I think that's really, really interesting because I work with a lot of very hands-on people and different industries, as I'm sure you do, where they kind of say, oh, yeah, but when you're in the office and you're in an agency, it's easy to do level 10s, but we've got people on the shop floor and it's different. And I always say, it's not. And I think that you have to give them the opportunity. And if you give them the opportunity, they're going to love it. So can we go a little bit deeper in terms of, so bakers and decorators, they are very much hands-on people, right? They're not office workers. They're not but why did they love it? What was important for them?
For them, I think it was getting clear on a lot of the logistical things. So when you're making a cake, you're basically spinning straw into gold. And these are high-end custom cakes, okay? These aren't just, happy birthday mom cakes, although we did plenty of those. These were what my sister called runway cakes. And so there was a lot of involvement, a lot of hands in the process. Everybody had to be involved from beginning to end. Um, and what it helped the decorators and the bakers do is really plan for their week because, some weeks we did 250 custom cakes in a week, and that really had to be planned. And so for them, taking that, I think it was a 45-minute meeting or hour, actually. I think they took a full hour every week to go through all the logistics, all the handoffs, all of that, and get it all figured out. And it just made their lives so much smoother and easier. And, to carry on, with your uh, pushback that you get sometimes from your clients, if I could get 16-year-old kids to show up on a Saturday morning at 6 o'clock for a level 10 meeting, my counter kids, there's no excuse out there. I mean, because try to get a teenager out of bed on a Saturday morning. But they wouldn't miss it. They wouldn't miss it for anything. They loved it. And it had them feeling like they had a voice in the business.
I completely agree. I think it's a chance for everybody to be involved in terms of raising issues, but also to contribute to the greater vision of the business. I think that's what really helps them understand that even though they may only play a small part, a counter kid, for example, it's still a really important part of the business, and they get to see how that all fits together, which makes them more, I guess, accountable, but also they're more involved, they're more engaged. They just want to be part of that longer term vision.
Totally.
And I think you made a really valid point, sorry, just in terms of they're not always 90 minutes. I think people get nervous. They go, oh, but it's such a long meeting. When they're at that level, they can be shorter than 90 minutes as long as they're following the same agenda. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As long as half of the time is spent IDSing. So for our counter kids, it was a 15-minute meeting, right? But required, you had to be there at 6 o'clock. And what their issues consisted of mostly were missed opportunities. Hey, a customer came in and asked for donuts, and we don't have donuts. Or a customer came in and complained that, the coffee wasn't hot enough. So these were issues that wouldn't have been raised otherwise. We never would have known, right? And they felt that they were really contributing by letting us know about some of those things.
And as you said, I always I struggle with the word issues because they're not always negatives. There can be opportunities there, and a lot of them are. So it's like actually identifying some of those opportunities. If they can bring a new product or a new service into the business, then that makes them feel very special.
Yeah, the word issue, I tell my clients, just means topic. If you look it up, it's just a topic.
Okay. So it actually hasn't got that definition of being negative. I think we just associate it with being negative. It takes me back to when I was running the bus company. One of our top selling products actually came from a lady who worked on the ticket counter selling bus tickets to people. And she came to one of our meetings and said, I've got this idea. We should do this like a phone card back in the day where you can buy a certain number of hours of bus travel and then you get to use it on the network anywhere you want to. And it led into us launching a product called FlexiPass that completely changed the trajectory of the bus company. So, the ideas don't just always sit in leadership teams. They often come from people who are on the shop floor who are thinking about the business.
Right.
Okay, so it can be as short as 15 minutes. I think that's really important for people listening in. I think there is this kind of misconception that it's going to be a 90-minute meeting. I always say we don't want meetings for meeting's sake, but we do have to have everybody have an opportunity to contribute. And it can be short and sharp as long as you said half of the time is spent IDSing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. And that's really, really helpful. Now, I know you sort of very quickly dropped in a little thing about rolling out EOS. And I know that you have been working on a book over the summer period about how to roll out EOS. It's probably one of the biggest challenges for a lot of businesses. It's easy for the leadership team to embrace it, but how do you take it further beyond that? Tell us a bit about the book you've been writing.
I've been working all summer with another EOS implementer, Marissa Smith. She's an amazing implementer out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, here in the States. And I think both of us realize that, rollout is an area that really just needs more attention as far as having some content to teach people or reference material. And people are really hungry for it. So we worked over the summer to write the book that we wish we could give our own clients at the end of Vision Building Day 2. Like, okay, so now the leadership team is completely aligned on the vision for the most part, right? They're aligned on they've answered all the 8 questions, and they're talking about rolling out EOS. And what I think you and I both see more often than not is that it gets stuck at the leadership team. And they have a very difficult time getting it past the leadership team. And often the mid managers aren't carrying it with the same gusto that they have. And it just kind of peters out. And that's when people give up on EOS. And so we wrote the book to give people an easy path. And, the first thing that we talk about is that, before you do anything with rollout, you've got to be aligned as a leadership team. And that means that you have to believe every word on that VTO for the most part. I mean, some things are still kind of works in progress, but you're aligned enough to start bringing this vision to the rest of the organization. And then you've got to make a plan. And where we see it fail a lot, I think, and you can back me up with your own experience here, is the teams that wing it just think that, oh, it's an event, it's not a journey. And so a lot of the book focuses on the journey and why it's so hard. So there's even a chapter in the book about brain science and why people resist things like my bakers did, right? And it's just natural. It's human. Rewiring all those, synapses in our brains, requires a lot of effort and repetition. And so a large part of the book is just explaining how human brains work and what to expect and tips and tricks with how to address the resistance that you're going to encounter. And then how do you implement it well within the organization? And we take people all the way through quarterly and annual planning at the department level. So there's an explanation of that and what that looks like. There's a clear understanding of how you use your marketing strategy, for example, and get everybody on board to create a great customer experience. And then we talk about sustainability and what that really looks like on the long term, because the idea is that EOS is, again, not just an event. The assumption is that you're going to run on EOS forever. And how do you do that well? And how do you keep the energy alive and sustain that in the organization? So that's primarily what the book is about. And so for people that have rolled out already, I think there's still value in reading the book because you can go back and maybe see areas where, maybe it wasn't done as well as it could have been. And we've included a couple of tools. There's a rollout tracker that gives people a sense of actually where they are in the rollout process, not being prescriptive, but just, painting a picture of what 100%, rollout looks like, and then allowing people to go through that tracker and check it. And I'm happy to share that, by the way. The tracker might be helpful for your clients until the book comes out in January. But anyway, it's something that we're excited about, and I think it's something that they're excited about it worldwide as well, and they've been very helpful and encouraging in getting this content out. So we think January is when it's going to come out.
That sounds fantastic. I think it's something that is sorely missing. I must admit that, as you said, you may have already gone through your rollout, but sometimes reading these books, there's just little aha moments in there. You kind of go, oh, yeah, we didn't quite do that. I can see the data book behind you. And I remember I've now read the data book 3 times because every time I read it, there's something else that comes out for me. It's something else I can share with my clients. And yeah, it's great to go a little bit deeper. And I think also, yes, it's very, very simple, but it isn't easy. And as you said, it's a journey. I think a lot of clients, as you said, they do their, oh, we've launched our VTO, we've done our sort of first day of the company update, and we're done. I was like, yep, no, that's just the start.
And there's lots of client stories in the book too, so that people can see themselves. We have, I think at least 20 different example stories of different rollouts and what that looks like, states of the company, and all kinds of stuff like that. So
very excited. Look forward to receiving that. So you're an expert EOS implementer, which means you have done, oh gosh, at least over 500 sessions. I'm guessing a whole lot more by now. You've worked with many, many different clients, I'm guessing, throughout that time. Do you have a few client stories you could share where, EOS has been an absolute game changer? for the business?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had so many different clients from a lot of different businesses. And I think that I've got a couple that come to mind right away. One is the client I've had since I got out of boot camp. Okay, so this was a client that I've had for 8 years. And what is amazing about this company, it's Clear Height Properties. They do commercial real estate. They basically take, not so great warehouses and make them pretty and profitable. That's what they do. And so they have grown from a 8-person company to also a 30-something company at this point. And they just keep going deeper with this process. And I'm still their implementer. They still want to use me for sessions. And they've really leveraged just about every bit of the EOS offerings. So they've sent all of their managers to Great Boss workshops. Their integrator has attended integrator masterclass. They've gone to the EOS conference. They've participated in so many different things. And it just astounds me that they keep getting more and more out of the system after 8 years. And it's just incredible to see that. And the results are there. And when they pulled out their 3-year picture at 3 years, and like surprising, like somebody was cleaning out their binder and they're like, "Oh wait, listen to this. Listen to what we said we thought was going to happen. Oh my gosh, we did that. We crushed that. Oh, that was, amazing." And so those are really gratifying moments. And then the other times, without mentioning companies by name, where they've really solved some team health issues, like maybe there was a toxic person on the leadership team and it was really awful for a while. And then they finally make the decision and get the right person on the team. And it makes all the difference in the world. And then they go, "Gosh, what took us so long? I don't know what took us so long." And it's coming. And the thing is that, as implementers, we know we're pretty confident like what needs to happen. But when they make the realization and they realize it for themselves and they work it out and they make the right decisions for the greater good of the company, it's just really great to see them enjoy it, right? Because then you're just kind of smiling to yourself, like, that's amazing. Like, that is so good. And you have to let them figure it out on their own terms and their own time, right?
And I think that's important. I think what some people think is as implementers, we're going to come in and we're going to have all the answers and we're going to sort of, tell you what to do. But we don't do that at all. We just give you the tools and the framework to actually help you make the right decisions yourself. And so it is a joy for us to see when that light bulb moment sort of happens and then they make the decision. And then more importantly, to see the results afterwards, because I've just finished recording a podcast on this actually. Nobody ever says, I'm glad we waited all this time to get rid of that person.
Never. Like, oh gosh, if we could only get them back. I have never heard that one. Not once.
No, it's great.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think what is my biggest revelation in being an implementer over these past 8 years has been the art of asking questions and how important that is. And I think that's what implementers bring. We may know what ultimately the answer is, the solution is, but it's the art of asking the question that gets them to that answer, right? And so I think that's the value we provide.
Absolutely. And we teach that to our leadership teams as well, because, again, often the answer, you don't have to have all the answers. You need to work together as a team and ask the right questions. And the answer, I just finished putting together something about IDS actually for another podcast I've done. And the identify part, asking all the curious questions rather than just jumping straight into trying to solve something. That's where the gold comes, because you ask the right questions. And if you get to the real issue, the answer is really obvious. It doesn't require too much thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, how often does the root cause reveal itself, 5, 10 minutes in? And it's like, whoa, 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 hang on a second. Like, what's going on here? And then oh, yeah, everybody knew it, but there you go.
Sometimes it's just easier to avoid some of those things, isn't it? Sweep it under the carpet and sort of just pretend it doesn't really exist.
Exactly, exactly. And that's what we do is we help them get there in a, psychologically safe space and allow them to figure it out.
Hey, I'm gonna switch things around a little bit now, and I'm gonna ask, have you got any examples where rollout has gone not so well? Because we're talking about all the positives, but I think sometimes hearing the not so well stuff helps us to understand what we could do better.
It's so funny that you asked this, and this wasn't a plant question, but I had a client, and this is another inspiration to the rollout book. They are actually mentioned in the store in as one of the stories in the book. They were gracious enough to just note it's here it is. So I had this client for 4 years, and EOS just never made it past the mid-manager level. It it just went boom, boom, and then just kinda stayed there. And one time in an annual, they had, I think over 100 issues on the issues list because I enumerate them so that we can feel good about how many issues we solved. But, the reverse actually happens. They feel pretty crappy when they see more than 75. And they saw all these issues and they're like, gosh, what's wrong with us? Are we broken? And I just, you know, in a moment that I'm usually pretty calm, but you know how we have those squishy animals? So we have I call them the talking animals. So there's like the elephant for, the elephant in the room and the cow for the sacred cow and everything. So anyway, there's a collection of animals in front of me. And I kind of lost it and I started like beaning the then integrator who was really a visionary in the integrator seat. And I was like, I said, the reason you have so many issues on your issues list is because these are departmental issues. These are not leadership team issues. And, so anyway, um, sometimes you got to interrupt the behavior, you know? And I think like me having a fit really sort of just kind of got through to them like, oh, we need to actually roll this out all the way. Yes. So that's one story. I'm sure you have
Oh,
some.
I have plenty as well, but I just want to ask, I think a question that'd be really good to explore for the listeners particularly. I see as I work with clients over the time period that we work together that, the leadership team, it does start off being very operational, right? Some of the issues come up and you kind of think, seriously, are we as a leadership team discussing this? But you have to let them work through that and find it out for themselves. But how would you define leadership team versus operational departmental teams?
Well, it depends on the business, right? So, I mean, the smaller the business, the more tactical the leaders are just need to be. Unfortunately, and that this is almost every small team I work with, their capacity is just the biggest issue that they have because they're all spinning, all these plates. And so in those companies, and especially like the hands-on companies, they get very tactically focused. My bakery it was very hard to get people to not just think about building making the cakes every week. They just so but as I often explain to my clients, as companies grow and they get bigger and the roles get redefined in the seats for the leaders on the team, these roles become more strategic and more people focused as the company grows. And that means you need to keep up as if you want to stay with the company. And so what I find often is that companies get to a point where one or maybe more leaders on the team can't make the jump. The seat outgrows them to a degree, and they have a very difficult time thinking strategically. And that can cause a company to actually hit a ceiling. When you have one or two departments that are just really struggling, I think, to think strategically and see how it all works together, I've seen that slow down a company pretty quickly. Have you had that experience too?
Yeah, I have, and I think you're right. It does come down to the size as well, because the smaller teams definitely have to be a whole lot more hands-on. But then as the team grows, obviously the role of those leaders change. And I think I've had a couple of hissy fits in sessions as well, where we've been talking about stuff, and I look around the table, and I go, do you know how much this meeting is costing us? My time and all of your time around the table, and we're discussing something that's worth this amount of money in the business. It's like, does this really make any sense? Because as a leadership team, you've got to ask yourself those questions. Are we actually discussing the things that will really move the needle strategically, longer term?
Right, right. And it's like, the other thing to note for anybody who's, solving issues, is there a theme to the issues on your issues list? Wow, there are a lot of marketing issues here. That's interesting, right? And so why are there so many marketing issues? Like, let's think about that for a second. And anyway, I sometimes getting the teams to take a step back and see things like that, that's also the role that we play. But it is neat to see folks who take the challenge and decide that they're, going to start thinking more strategically. I especially love it when a functional leader becomes an integrator or something like that on the team. It's just like, all right, here we go, let's go. Because ideally, you paint a picture of what the seat looks like. And, for the right person, they're like, that's me. I'm going there. I can't wait to embody that seat. And it's so cool when that actually plays out. So that company I was telling you about that was so slow in their rollout, when the visionary finally got out of the integrator seat and we got the right woman in that seat to be the integrator, oh man, it was like night and day. It was just so great to see. And she had to learn a lot. I mean, she had to learn about the P&L and all kinds of things, but it was so great to see that.
No, I've seen it actually, even quite early on in some journeys. If you get that right integrator in there and the visionary truly lets go, because that's the challenge, is being able to actually let go to allow the integrator to run the business. It can change things so quickly.
Absolutely.
I think you've mentioned you're a visionary. I'm a visionary as well in my own businesses, but I have one of those few people who scores over 80% on both the visionary and the integrator. So I actually,
Same.
because there's not many
I
of
know.
us, but
No, I feel like such a weirdo.
I know, me too. But it is good because I think it helps me to relate to visionaries, but I can also relate to integrators as well because I do understand what has to go on. But I know that, where was I going with that? I think that as a visionary, it's really hard for us to let go at times. And we think we're helping, but we're actually just meddling. And when we start to meddle and we don't allow that integrator to truly get on with the role, we're making things a whole lot worse.
Absolutely.
I see a lot of visionaries, particularly smaller, or maybe I would say maybe less experienced businesses where the visionaries are, oh, but I can't give them the profit and loss because then they'll see where I'm spending money and they don't want me to see that. And it's like, yeah, we've got to get past that somehow. How do you tackle that? Have you ever had that experience?
Well, yeah, I mean, financial numbers. You always talk, it's always funny to me because it's like we talked about this in the 90-minute meeting where we said revenue, profit, and measurables that we were going to share that information, right? And then, we get into VB1 or VB2 and somebody, the owner says, well, we're not sharing the numbers. And I thought, like, were you there? Were you at the 90? Yes, you were. Oh, wait, you were on your phone. But no, it's something that I am glad actually, I joked around about the great game of business. That actually was a great system for us at the time, but it's all about open book management. And so I always share the experience of being open book and sharing the numbers and how that made a group of bakers and decorators make great choices about, for example, what box to grab. Do I grab the box that costs the company 65 cents or do I get the one that's 15 cents? And it was amazing that when we started sharing the numbers, how quickly we got back to profitability. And so I share that story because I think that if people think that, this can actually happen and it's not going to turn against you, that it's a much easier sell then. Because they just want it, they don't know, and because they've heard from their friends, don't share the numbers, like you or their parents or somebody.
Yeah, and I think, I've certainly, do a lot of work with the entrepreneurs organization, a lot of the EO members, they are sort of slightly younger, slightly earlier on in their journey, and they're putting a lot of the expenses and things through the business that maybe they shouldn't. And And they said, but if I share this, they'll see that I'm paying for my golf club membership. It's like, well, maybe you need to kind of consider whether you should be paying for the golf club membership, or should you be paying yourself a fair salary for the role that you do so you can afford to pay for your own golf club membership. And so, we had some of those conversations, but I think that they're always scared that the team will think they're earning this huge amount of money when normally the team actually has expectations. They're earning a whole lot more than what you share with them in the end. And so when you share the real numbers, as you said, first of all, they kind of go, oh, okay, we're not making that much money. And then secondly, it helps them to understand how do they contribute to that. As you said, they'll make changes. I had an advertising agency where the team there was spending a huge amount on Ubers. And so the owner of the business started to share profit and loss line by line and go through every single expense with them. And they got to the Uber line. They all went, how can we have so much expense on Ubers? He said, well, why do you think that is? I was like, I don't know. I said, well, because you catch Ubers. You jump in Ubers. You might be just 2 minutes away from each other. You'll both catch a separate Uber and off you go. And it explained what impact that had on profitability. And they were all on incentive schemes that were based around profitability. And once he shared that, suddenly their behavior changed. It's like rather than just jumping in an Uber to walk 5 minutes down the road, they'd walk or they'd share an Uber. And suddenly that one line in the expense, profit and loss was reduced, which meant they made more profit.
Right. And, for at the bakery, what we did was, if we make over 15% net operating profit, I mean, we went through a whole financial literacy training with our team. And interestingly, I've had a couple of clients do that as well. And it's made a huge difference in those companies because if people realize like, oh, I'm not going to get that raise, or I'm not going to get that nice bonus check at the end of the year if we don't hit our target profit. Because you only get those bonuses if the company performs in a certain way. That's how it should be. And unfortunately, most entrepreneurs just give a bonus because I'm supposed to give a bonus at Christmas, not because we hit our target profit, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I think you're right about the financial literacy. I mean, you can't just share those numbers without actually having some work around with the team in terms of teaching them how it works. I've actually been quite surprised. Some of my quite established businesses with very senior leaders in them, some of them don't even understand basic P&L. So just going through it in a session and talking about and using things like the cash flow drivers to help drive the change, they suddenly have an understanding of how it works. And I think you assume that they understand it, but why would they? It's not taught at school. If you're part of the sales team, do you have to know how those things work? Probably not normally, but if you can get them to understand it, then it becomes a game. I always say business is like a big game for me. It is. I think these are the rules. This is how we win. This is what we're going to do to score the goals,
Right. I mean, I agree. Business is a game. It's fun. And like, how do we win at this game?
But if you don't tell people what the rules are, then it's very hard for them to know how to win.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my goodness, there's so much we've covered here, but there's two more questions that I thought of. So first of all was that you mentioned you've been working with a client for 8 years. And I wanted to just dive a little bit deeper into that because we always talk about the fact we are here to teach. We're not here to consult, and we want to make sure that people are, can graduate when they're ready. But I'm a bit like you. I've got some clients who I've been working with for 4 or 5 years. Why would you suggest that's a good thing?
This is my own experience, right? When we graduated EOS using Clark, it honestly was for financial reasons first. And then, um, I was starting to think, well, maybe I want to do this implementer thing. It is very difficult to facilitate a meeting and be in the meeting. In fact, it's pretty much impossible. And so I found that I was really good at facilitating the meetings, but wasn't able to actively help in the decision making, and I was like half in, half out. And I think that for the clients that I've had more than a couple of years, they felt the same way. They felt like, you know what, we don't want to facilitate our own meetings, and it's worth it to have an outsider come in, ask the tough questions, facilitate the meeting, get us to the right answers. And so for my long-term clients, that's almost always why. And we do go through a graduation ceremony. I still give them a rock that's engraved, with their name, their logo on it. And then they wear the orange caps and we do pomp and circumstance and the whole bit. So I say, well, you've graduated in that you're You're getting 80% of your rocks done quarter over quarter. You're getting 80% of your goals done year over year. But, when you feel like you want to just do this on your own, you go. You're ready.
But as you said, I think I've got the same experience. I think it is, I mean, I know from my own businesses as well, I don't try and run my own quarterlies because there's no point. You can't. It's really, really hard to actually facilitate and be actively participating and not be a little bit biased as the visionary as well, because we've got our own, our own hat on, which means that and we're very persuasive. I think this is the other thing. Visionaries can be hugely persuasive. It's kind of good. It's what we're good at. And so we can convince anybody to do what we want, but it may not be the right answer, whereas an external facilitator will call bullshit on that and have you make the right decisions. So it's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, one last thing, and then we probably have to wrap it up, even though I'm sure we could talk for hours. But I know that you have also got your own podcast. And so I just wondered if you could tell me a little bit about that and tell us how we can find that.
Yeah, the podcast is called Bad Boss Confessional. And the idea came to me during Great Boss workshops with Renee. And I turned to him at a break and I said, people just want to tell you their worst stories. It's crazy. They just want to tell, oh, well, let me tell you about the time that I fired this guy and blah, 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 blah. And I said, isn't that nuts? I said, we should have a confessional here, like, virtually, like people could go into it. And anyway, he was like, oh yeah, So anyway, I thought, what a great idea for a podcast, because if I can get leaders to share a story, a cringy story from when they messed up and wish they could do over, or, maybe they didn't even know what happened until 10 years later, and share that story, maybe it would help the rest of us feel like we weren't so screwed up. And I think that's what it is that people are ashamed. They carry a lot of shame and guilt and imposter syndrome, things like that around leading and managing people. And when you find out that some of the most successful people have some of the craziest, cringiest stories, it just lowers the temperature, right? And then we all start to feel a little bit more normal, a little bit more human. And don't we need that in this world? A little bit more vulnerability, a little bit less righteousness, and I'm right, you're wrong, and more, boy, did I get that wrong. And let me tell you what I learned. And so that's what the podcast is all about. I've had some really great guests. Renee was my first guest, Renee Boer, who wrote How to Be a Great Boss. And he was very entertaining and had a lot of stories to share, as he always does. And I've had Kelly Knight, who's the integrator at EOS Worldwide. And I've had people I don't know at all who aren't even in EOS and don't even hardly know what it is, but they're still willing to share the stories, because I think that that's a universal among bosses, is that we're all kind of struggling. And I think once you realize, like, this is a journey that everybody's on,
makes it so much easier. Yeah. And yes, it normalizes it. I think you're absolutely right. We actually run a mastermind for our integrators that Adam and I work with. And, that mastermind, getting together and having them sort of share stories, that you can see almost a look of relief when they kind of go, oh, phew, it's not just me. And okay, this happens to everybody. And it just makes it sort of much easier to go, okay, this is normal. Now, how can we deal with it?
Right, right. I mean, that's the power of peer groups and all of those things, right? Is knowing that you're not alone, because isn't entrepreneurship just about the loneliest thing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually, a couple of episodes ago, I actually had a couples counselor come on who specializes in working with entrepreneurial couples where they're in their marriage, because often, your husband, your wife, your partner may not be involved in business or in the business, or maybe just doesn't even understand business. And so you can't talk to them about it because they're not in the same situation, which makes it very lonely. So yeah, interesting. Okay, probably have to wrap up there, but honestly, Beth, it's been absolutely amazing to talk to you. I've loved hearing your stories. I want to just mention a couple of things there. So we've got the Great Boss workshops, which anybody can actually attend. They run both virtually and also in person. So certainly look those up. We've got the Rollout book coming out in January, which I'm super excited about. Can't wait to see that. And I've got Beth's podcast, which, just remind me what it's called again. Confessional.
Bad Boss Confessional.
Bad Boss Confessional. Brilliant. I do always ask my guests 3 top tips or tools. Is there 3 top things that you could share with us that, for somebody listening in, rather than just going away feeling very inspired, there's something they could actually do moving on from this podcast?
I'm a big advocate for journaling and the EOS Life Journal. I don't know if you've ever,
I've got them in
yeah,
my
I love
bookshelf.
that. Yes, absolutely love that one. Journaling is really important I mean, because that way you're doing almost daily clarity breaks and really giving yourself time to think. So journaling, um, keep keep the machine moving, you know? Um, that's the other thing that we tend to forget about, and especially entrepreneurs, is that, we kind of work ourselves into an unhealthy place. And you really have to take care of your body and your mind. And, meditation would, I guess, be my third thing. Those three things for me um, actually led to me being here in front of you today, right? Like my journey as an implementer started with a clarity break, and it started with needing to get my life back and, reducing the stress that I was experiencing as a entrepreneur, right? So, I mean, I think taking care of yourself, it is not selfish. It's actually for the people around you.
Absolutely. It is interesting. I've been doing hyperbaric oxygen chamber sessions weekly because I'm not very good at switching off. I'm not very good at turning off my technology. And so when you go into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, it's pressurized for 60 to 90 minutes, which means no technology can go in with you. Otherwise it would explode. And so I've been doing that now for almost, I think it's been about 3 months. And I have to say, my life has changed significantly. My business has changed significantly because of that time just spent each week completely away from all the noise or the distractions. And I've obviously made changes to my health and everything else because of it as well. So it's been fantastic.
Wow. So I have to ask a question. So what does your mind do for 60 to 90 minutes?
So I'm going to be really honest. The first 15 minutes, I just have to get everything out of my head. So I take a notepad in with me and I just get all of the to-dos, all the things that are on my mind. 15 minutes. I think last time I wrote 2 pages of things I just had to get out of my brain. And then I sit there and then I do one of 2 things. I either just sit there and see if something comes naturally. I do have the clarity break questions, which I've got here laminated that I take in with me, and I do go through those. But I've also been using the clarity field guide, which was actually written by one of the old EOS implementers, where it actually challenges you to look at 2 questions depending on what season you're in. One that, really appeals to you. So a couple of weeks ago, the one that really appealed was what's on your bucket list. And so, of course, yeah, I love writing bucket lists. And then it challenges you to pick one that scares you. And the question that that I picked was, where is your soul in all of this? And I knew, because I'm a get shit done kind of person. So thinking about my soul is not something that I'm really normally very good at. And I can be really honest. I ended up crying in the middle of the hyperbaric oxygen chamber. I just wrote screeds and screeds of stuff, but it was just that question. Just something went off in me. It's like, oh my goodness, it was brilliant.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's what I do. I have to get the noise, the busyness, the noisiness out first. Otherwise, I just cannot concentrate. But it is amazing how quickly 90 minutes actually does go when you're just thinking about one question.
I have to find me a hyperbaric chamber.
I think what it has done for me is even if that's not available, I now know that taking that proper time without any distractions is really important. But I wouldn't have been able to do it without actually I'm forced, locked in a chamber. Can't do anything about it.
How neat.
Oh yeah, very neat. Okay, we're going to make sure that we've got all your contact details in the links from the podcast. And obviously, if you Google Beth Fahey or look on LinkedIn, she's very easy to find. Beth, I want to thank you for your willingness to share so much and to be really open about your own journey as well as other customers. I really, really enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Same. It's been great getting to know you even better.
Thank you very much.